Hello to all my dear followers. Today I welcome you to a new chapter of What If Naruto Appeared in One Piece and charmed BOA Hancock. Remember, if you want more chapters of this fanfic, just fill out the comment section. Enjoy.
Chapter 2 Naruto continued lying on Sandersonia's back, shielding his back from the mark he'd seen on Hancock. Meanwhile, the raven-haired girl continued to cover her face with her hand. Seeing no one else, the blonde boy decided to move off the green-haired girl's back and return to Luffy. "We're sorry, Anisama," said the green-haired girl, kneeling down, as did the orange-haired girl. "Not only did we lose, but we were saved by the enemy," said the orange-haired girl. Luffy, with Naruto's help, returned the petrified girls to the main platform, watching and listening to everything that was happening. "So, now I'm going to fight you," said Luffy, looking at Hancock while holding the petrified Margaret. At this comment, Hancock frowned and then sighed. "That's enough. I'm not in the mood for this anymore," said the raven-haired girl, shaking her head. "Really?" said Luffy. Seeing the girls, "It was pure luck that nothing happened to them after those crazy attacks," Naruto said, looking the three petrified girls up and down. "Great, I was worried something had happened to them," Luffy said, sighing with relief. "Hey, could you turn those girls back to normal, please?" Naruto asked. This caused Marigold and Sandersonia to look at him in surprise, while Hancock gave Naruto a cold stare. "What are you saying?" Hancock asked. "You can do it, right? They were just trying to protect me, they didn't do anything wrong, please," Luffy shouted. Upon hearing Luffy's words, Hancock looked at him for a few seconds before closing her eyes and giving her answer. "That's right, I have the ability to turn them back to normal," the dark-haired woman said, opening her eyes. "But," Hancock began, standing up. "You mentioned that you needed a ship to return to a place," Hancock said, looking at Luffy. "That's right, my crewmates are waiting for me," Luffy said. "I see. On another note, your blonde friend didn't say anything. Why is that?" Hancock asked, looking at Naruto. "I'm with Luffy, so my goal is the same," Naruto said, making Luffy's eyes light up. "So you'll be my crewmate?" Luffy asked, and Naruto nodded. "Awesome!" Luffy exclaimed happily. "I see, so that's how it is," Hancock said, her eyes darkening. "But I'll only grant you one thing. Return those girls to normal or get them off this island alive. Whichever you choose, you'll have to forget about the other," Hancock said, smiling, as did the other two girls. Naruto, for his part, closed his eyes and crossed his arms, leaving the decision to Luffy, since he was the one who insisted so much on returning the girls to normal, in addition to asking for a ship. Upon hearing this, Luffy quickly lay down on the ground in a bowing position. "Really? Thank you so much," Luffy said, sighing with a huge smile. "So you'll return them to normal, then? Right?" Luffy said, shocking the three women and making Naruto smile. This was something he would definitely do, he liked Luffy. "Thank you very much," Luffy said, touching the ground with his forehead. "Anisama?" Marigold asked. Hancock, for her part, was still surprised, but then she looked down, causing her eyes to darken. She stood up and began to descend the stairs, watched by Naruto, who, seeing her, would be on high alert in case she tried anything against him and Luffy. The woman passed by Luffy, who was still on the ground smiling, and then turned to look at her. Hancock, noticing this, glanced at him and then at Naruto, seeing that he hadn't taken his eyes off her with his one visible eye. Hancock put her hand in a fist in front of the girls, then opened her palm. Outside the stadium. "Anyway, those men. I can't believe they were able to fight the sisters on equal terms," said a girl with strange, dull orange hair. "That's right, but I don't think Hebeheim-sama will forgive them after their insults, and I also don't think she'll forgive those who helped her enter the country," said a girl with short, black hair. Suddenly, they heard the doors behind them open, revealing the three girls again. "Margaret! Sweet pea! Aphilandra!" exclaimed a girl with short brown hair happily. Girls, so here you are, Margaret said, greeting them. It's so good to see you back to normal, the girls said, running towards them and taking their hands. We were worried because you were still protecting that man with the straw hat, said the brown-haired girl. Goodness, I was worried about what happened to you, said a woman with long hair and purple eyes, a red snake draped over her shoulder. Back to normal? What exactly happened to us? Margaret asked, confused, as were the two other girls behind her. I haven't the slightest idea, Sweet Pea said, looking at her companion. Don't you remember anything? The purple-eyed woman asked. Well, no, the last thing I remember is that man was with us and he was very happy, and I also found out something strange, Margaret said, recalling what had happened a few minutes before they left. That's great, I was worried you were dead, Luffy said to a confused Margaret. There's no one here, Aphalandra said, looking around, confused. Is the event over? Sweet Pea asked. Naruto approached Margaret, who looked at him, confused. I'm glad you're okay, Margaret, Naruto said. Huh? How do you know my name? Margaret asked nervously. Naruto, upon realizing this, remembered that he had met her in her female form and not in her male form. Remembering this, he tensed up a little, sighing as he began to think about what to do until he made a decision. Although it would reveal some of his abilities, he didn't care much since it was just a transformation. Everyone watched Naruto as he closed his eyes and made a hand seal. Hancock, along with the green-haired and orange-haired girls, watched to see what he was going to do. Suddenly, Naruto was surrounded by a thick layer of smoke, which gradually dissipated, revealing a person Margaret recognized. They were all surprised, while Luffy stared in amazement at the transformation technique. Where the blonde boy had been standing, there was now a beautiful woman with golden hair tied in two long pigtails. Her skin was tanned like Naruto's, she had sapphire blue eyes, and her signature whisker marks. I think you know me like that, hee, Naruko said, putting her hand behind her head. And Naruko-san? Margaret said, surprised. Hancock approached the two girls, grabbing Naruko by the shoulders and starting to shake the blonde kitsune. Are you a woman? Hancock asked, looking at the blonde, whose eyes were spiraling. And no, I'm a man, Naruko said, trying to calm her dizziness. How can you say that? Your body is that of a woman, Hancock said, marveling at the beauty and physique of the blue-eyed blonde. Actually, this is a transformation. Naruko isn't real, Naruto said, dispelling his transformation, frightened by Hancock's gaze. A bead of sweat trickled down Naruto's cheek as he watched Hancock turn and walk away. Hey, you, thanks, Luffy said to Hancock. Margaret then snapped out of her shock and ran to the Empress, kneeling beside her two companions. Hebiheim-sama. Margaret called to the dark-haired woman. Continue striving to maintain the peace of this country, Hancock said, turning her gaze slightly before turning back to face forward and continuing on her way. Present day. And that was it. Margaret said, hiding her thoughts about Naruto. That's great. I understand you don't remember anything after being turned to stone. I'll tell you how it all happened later, said the short-haired, black-haired girl. Margaret, what happened to those men? Asked a black-haired girl whose hair was tied in a bun. What did Hebiheim-sama do to them? Did she turn them to stone? Said the girl with fluffy, dull orange hair, laughing strangely. I don't know for sure, but I think she took them to Kuja Castle, Margaret said, surprising everyone. Meanwhile, Naruto was sitting on the ground meditating, or at least that's what he seemed to be doing. Next to him was Luffy, who looked somewhat anxious and uncomfortable. Marigold and Sandersonia were also with them. Mind space. Kurama, I have a question, said Naruto. What kind of question? Asked Kurama. It's about what the old man said about Indra and Ashura, said Naruto. I see, well, as the old man said, by mixing your power with that of the Uchiha you mixed both souls, so to speak. The correct thing to say would be that you now possess yin-yang energy, you no longer possess just one. You can verify it by looking at the palms of your hands, Kurama said, and Naruto did as the fox instructed, examining his palms and seeing that the sun symbol was still there. However, he also had the moon symbol on his left hand. So now I possess both energies, Naruto said, and Kurama nodded. We told you, Naruto, you are now the second sage of 6 paths, you are practically a god, Matatabi said, surprising the blonde boy. This will be troublesome. I have to learn to use Sasuke's eyes. I'll practice later with the techniques I know from both eyes, Naruto said. You mean Amaterasu and the techniques Nagato used? Kurama asked, and Naruto nodded. We can train you with those eyes. We know about them, after all, our father had them, and we were able to learn many things. Besides, we'll teach you the creation of all things technique, Gyuki said. Each of us will teach you something so you can learn to control your full power. For now, get out of here and see what that woman wants, Kokuo said, and Naruto nodded, leaving his mindscape. Outside the mindscape. Ah. And what do you want now? Is it food after the fight? Luffy asked, starting to drool. If that's the case, I'd be very happy. Luffy said. No, I don't think so, Luffy, Naruto said, yawning. Sandersonia turned to look at Naruto. I think we owe you a thank you. Thank you very much, the green-haired woman said. You don't have to thank us. I simply did the right thing, Naruto said with a slight smile. If someone had seen what's behind our backs, we wouldn't have been able to stay in this country any longer, Marigold said. Just as Naruto was about to speak, a voice interrupted him. You can come in, Hancock said from the other side of the curtains. Huh? Naruto said, confused. Man, you can come in, Hancock said again. Without knowing why, Naruto simply stood up and approached the curtain, opening it slightly. He quickly looked away, his face burning with embarrassment and blood trickling from his nose. Even though he had seen her naked before, the moment and the situation hadn't bothered him. Why the hell are you naked? Naruto asked. You're very strange. You saw me like this before and didn't react, and now you see me again and react, Hancock said, letting go of her trench coat. Well, it doesn't matter, Hancock said, bringing her hand behind her head and holding back the long hair that covered her back. The girl closed her eyes, beginning to sweat and gasp slightly. Naruto sensed mixed emotions in her and turned to look at her, again ignoring the fact that she was naked. He could sense fear, resentment, and anger in her. Hancock's snake began to turn the dark-haired girl around, placing her on her back. With a trembling hand and body, she moved her hair aside, revealing the mark on her back. Luffy, who was somewhat distracted by curiosity, saw the mark and approached it for a closer look. That mark looks familiar, Luffy said, surprising the 3 girls. Have you seen it before? Naruto asked, crossing his arms. Where have you seen it? Do you know the meaning of this mark? Hancock asked. Luffy placed his hand on his chin, beginning to examine the mark, but he didn't answer. Answer already, it's not something I like to show off, Hancock told Luffy. Luffy continued staring at the mark without replying. Naruto, for his part, had a vague idea of what the mark meant, and seeing and feeling how the girl acted and felt, it wasn't something he should have. Well, looking at it closely, it's different from the one I've seen before, Luffy said. Hancock let down her hair and turned to look at the 2 boys. I have a friend named Hachi, and he's a fishman, Luffy said. A fishman? Hancock asked. Yes, and your mark looks like the one he has on his forehead, but I've never seen one like yours, Luffy said. Naruto kept analyzing everything and then sighed. A brand of slavery, Naruto said, shocking the 3 women and Luffy a little. How do you know it's a brand of slavery? Asked an old woman who was entering. Nyan-Basama, Marigold said. Naruto turned to look at her. Well, I'm not completely sure it is. I've seen some similar things before, but not one like that. But I simply deduced it was a brand of slavery because of the way she reacted. Her body was trembling, and she was experiencing a mix of emotions, Naruto said, surprising everyone. The old woman named Nyan then turned her gaze to Luffy. "You're the pirate monkey D, Luffy, right?" Nyan asked. "Yes, that's right." "How do you know who I am?" Luffy asked. "Do you really think no one knows about you after the global uproar you caused?" Nyan asked, holding up a newspaper. "Look at this paper. This man is responsible for a major incident in the Tsunade archipelago, where he punched a celestial dragon," the old woman Nyan said, shocking the three girls and leaving Naruto with a raised eyebrow. Judging by the old woman's voice, this thing called a celestial dragon was quite important. "A celestial dragon?" Hancock asked. "Though I think it's a miracle he managed to escape, considering he was only here a few days ago and came all the way to this island from so far away," Nyan said. "Who are you?" Marigold asked Luffy. "I already told you, I just arrived here out of nowhere. I don't even know where I am," Luffy exclaimed with a grin. "Besides, I don't regret what I did to that celestial dragon. That damned bastard, who does he think he is, messing with my friends?" "I'm lost," said Luffy. "What exactly is a celestial dragon?" "From the sound of it, it sounds like someone important," said Naruto, leaving everyone confused. "You don't know who the celestial dragons are?" asked Hancock, and Naruto shook his head. "The celestial dragons are the world nobles, although they're also known as celestial dragons, they're part of the world government. Because they have so much power, they're untouchable, so to speak. They can't be punished since they're above the law itself," Nyan said. "Besides, they do despicable things like buying and selling slaves," Luffy added. "I get it. They abuse their power," Naruto said, and everyone nodded. Nyan began to explain their history in more detail, detailing how the world government was formed and the various accidents these people had caused, which annoyed Naruto. "So, Mujiwara, did you really hit a celestial dragon?" Hancock asked. Luffy simply turned to look at her and nodded. "With everything you've just told me, I think I've found my purpose in this world," Naruto said seriously. "What kind of purpose?" Luffy asked, tilting his head. "I'm going to eradicate the celestial dragons and take control of the world government and change this world," Naruto said, shocking everyone, especially Hancock. "Are there still people this foolish, in this world?" Hancock said, her voice breaking, clutching the sheet as tears began to stream down her face. "There are still men who defy the heavens without a thought for their lives, men like him," Hancock exclaimed, covering her face with her hands. "Him?" Naruto and Luffy asked. Hancock removed her hands from her face, lowering her gaze. The room fell silent for a few seconds until she broke the silence. "I'll tell you everything, including the meaning of my mark and the one on your fishman friend's forehead," Hancock said. "Hachi's mark?" Luffy asked. "This is..." Hancock began, slowly reaching behind her back and gathering her hair. "The claw of the rising dragon, the mark of the celestial dragons," Hancock said, revealing the mark again, surprising Naruto and Luffy. "Those enslaved by the celestial dragons are marked so they won't be treated as humans," Hancock said, her coat covering her with the help of her snake. "Constellation dragons?" Luffy asked. "The three of us, a long time ago, were slaves of the world nobles," Hancock said, leaving Luffy in shock and annoying Naruto. "You were slaves?" Luffy asked. The place fell silent for a few seconds until Hancock began to speak again. "That happened when I was 12 years old," Hancock said, beginning to tell her story. Hancock, along with Marigold and Sandersonia, were children aboard the Kuja pirates' ship. They were practicing for when they would begin their own adventures once they were old enough. The three were being watched by two Kuja pirates who had to leave them briefly to carry some things inside. However, when they returned, there was no sign of the three little girls. "The three of us were kidnapped from the Kuja ship," Hancock said, continuing her story. "The three girls were huddled together before the world nobles who were there for the slave auctions. All three had chains on their hands and necks. And we were auctioned off, Hancock finished her previous sentence. I can barely bear the horrible memories we have and try to forget, Hancock said. Young Hancock was chained, unable to escape. Behind her stood a celestial dragon carrying a burning metal object bearing their mark. As the dark-haired girl watched him place the object on her back, she shook her head, tears streaming down her face. She tried to flee, but her attempts were futile. He pressed the burning mark against her back, causing her to scream. However, her scream was muffled by the immense pain, she couldn't speak. The first men I ever saw were horror personified, Hancock said, her voice slightly broken. Naruto, meanwhile, clenched his fists as he watched Sandasonia, who had proven to be a strong woman, clutch her head, trying to stifle her sobs. However, she couldn't hold it in any longer and cried out into the air as tears streamed from her eyes. Sonia-nisama, calm down. Marigold tried unsuccessfully to soothe the green-haired girl. Those memories that haunt us. Hancock began. Seeing the green-haired girl's reaction and hearing Hancock speak, Luffy turned to her again. Hey. It's okay, you don't have to relive something so awful, just leave it, Luffy said, trying to get Hancock to stop telling her story. Luffy's right, you don't have to keep telling us this if you don't want to, Naruto said, in the same state as Luffy, but the black-haired girl continued. Those days were so terrible that all I could think about was dying, Hancock said. Hey, that's enough. Naruto exclaimed. But one night, 4 years ago, something happened that shook the world government, Hancock said, her gaze lowered. No one could rise up against the celestial dragons, that was an unbreakable rule. But there was a man who scaled the Grand Line with his bare hands and entered Marijoa, where the celestial dragons lived, Hancock said, taking a deep breath before continuing. Later, that man would be known as the Fishman Captain, Fisher Tiger. To free all the fishmen who had been enslaved, he unleashed all his rage, Hancock said. Marijoa was in complete chaos, the entire place was ablaze, and the slaves were beginning to escape, shouting with excitement that they were free. He didn't like humans, but when it came to slaves, he didn't discriminate and freed thousands of slaves of all races, Hancock said. Among all those people and creatures fleeing the place, Hancock, Sandersonia, and Marigold could be seen running away, their clothes dirty and worn, glancing back at the chaos and the burning building, with slaves escaping. We ran for our lives, Hancock said, remembering that day. As they ran, the building behind them began to collapse completely, but they kept running until they passed a figure. Hancock turned to look at it, surprised to see a man standing there, observing everything with a serious and cold expression. We owe that man so much, Hancock said, finishing her story before sitting on the edge of the enormous bed. Tiger released many fishmen into the seas, but those who bore the mark couldn't have it erased. Tiger became an enemy of the world government and formed the Sun Pirates, taking the fishmen he had freed with him, Hancock said, taking another breath. And as if removing a curse, he modified the dragon claw mark and transformed it into the symbol of the sun, Hancock said, leaving Luffy surprised. Naruto remained silent, listening to everything. He didn't want to say much since he knew nothing about the place he was in, and from what he'd heard so far, he already had a bad impression of it. The reason your friend's mark resembles mine is because it must be the mark of the Sun Pirates, Hancock said without looking at Luffy. That's right, the mark on Hachi's forehead is like a sun. So, was he a slave too? Luffy asked. It wasn't necessarily like that, said Sandersonia, who was lying on the ground. That mark distinguished those who had been slaves from those who hadn't, but what is clear is that it distinguished those who were Sun Pirates, Marigold explained. So those who belong to the Sun Pirates and who possess or possessed that mark weren't necessarily slaves, but also fishmen who joined later, said Naruto, and Marigold nodded. But Fisher Tiger died a long time ago, and the Sun Pirates split into several crews, said Nyan. Luffy was then overcome by a brief memory. Flashback. Luffy was walking past other people when he looked at one with an elongated trunk. Hey, when did you hurt your forehead? Luffy asked, pointing to his forehead. Ah. Don't worry about it, said the fishman. End flashback. So he has a past too, said Luffy. That's why the mark on our backs resembles that of the fishmen, Marigold said. I see, now I understand, Luffy said. Fortunately, while we were slaves, we were forced to eat the Mero Mero no Mi and the Hibi Hibi no Mi, purely for training purposes, and that's why we've been able to protect our country and conceal our past, Hancock said. If you hadn't covered Sonya's back then, we wouldn't have been able to stay on this island, Hancock said, watching Naruto as tears began to stream down his face. They must never know our past, she said, her voice breaking as tears fell onto her arms and legs. It doesn't matter if I have to deceive an entire country. I won't let it be known. I will never be controlled by anyone again. Hancock shouted angrily, tears streaming down her face. She continued to scream, shaking her head, tears splashing more than just down her arms. She simply pulled her legs up onto the bed, hugged her knees, and buried her face in them. I'm so afraid of letting my guard down. It's so terrible I can't bear it, Hancock said, no longer able to hide her emotions. Anisama, Marigold said, weeping as she watched her sister cry uncontrollably. The old woman, Nyan, smiled at this and climbed onto her snake-like staff, swaying gently as she spoke happily. It's been a long time since I've seen you show your feelings like this. I was even starting to think Helheim had turned to ice, Nyan said. Hancock blushed slightly at this, and she simply brought a hand to her eyes, wiping away her tears before standing up. Silence. You're just a traitor who abandoned her country. Hancock shouted angrily. You're the one who should be quiet. They were just a couple of brats who, after escaping the celestial dragons, didn't know how to get back home. Who do you think brought them back? The old woman Nyan said, facing Hancock. You should be grateful that I'm living off this island. Nyan yelled at Hancock, who just turned away with a huff. You're always complaining about trivial things, Hancock said without looking at the old woman. What are you saying? Nyan shouted, being held back by both sisters. Nyan Basama, they both sighed. It's been a long time since I've seen you show your feelings like this. I was even starting to think Helheim had turned to ice, Nyan said. Hancock blushed slightly at this, and she simply brought a hand to her eyes, wiping away her tears before standing up. Silence. You're just a traitor who abandoned her country. Hancock shouted angrily. You're the one who should be quiet. They were just a couple of brats who, after escaping the celestial dragons, didn't know how to get back home. Who do you think brought them back? The old woman Nyan said, facing Hancock. You should be grateful that I'm living off this island. Nyan yelled at Hancock, who just turned away with a huff. You're always complaining about trivial things, Hancock said without looking at the old woman. What are you saying? Nyan shouted, being held back by both sisters. Nyan Basama, they both sighed. It's been a long time since I've seen you show your feelings like this. I was even starting to think Helheim had turned to ice, Nyan said. Hancock blushed slightly at this, and she simply brought a hand to her eyes, wiping away her tears before standing up. Silence. You're just a traitor who abandoned her country. Hancock shouted angrily. You're the one who should be quiet. They were just a couple of brats who, after escaping the celestial dragons, didn't know how to get back home. Who do you think brought them back? The old woman Nyan said, facing Hancock. You should be grateful that I'm living off this island. Nyan yelled at Hancock, who just turned away with a huff. You're always complaining about trivial things, Hancock said without looking at the old woman. What are you saying? Nyan shouted, being held back by both sisters. Nyan Basama, they both sighed. I took care of you like I was your own mother. And you still say it's a small thing, Helheim. Nyan said as the sisters nodded and Hancock ignored her. Naruto and Luffy just watched, completely confused. Hancock walked to her bed, then stopped and clutched her coat tightly. Now that you know. Hancock said, drawing the boy's attention, Will you hate me for having been a slave? She asked. Huh, was all they both said. Hancock closed her eyes, waiting for their response. What on earth are you talking about? Why should I hate you just for having been a slave? That has nothing to do with it. A person would hate someone for their attitude or past actions, Naruto said. Besides, from what I could tell, both Luffy and I hate the celestial dragons, Naruto said, and Luffy nodded. This caused Hancock to open her eyes in surprise and let tears flow again, a blush rising to her cheeks. I think I like you. Hancock said, making Naruto tense up and his one visible eye turn white. Tell me where you want to go. My ship will be at your complete disposal. Hancock said, surprising Naruto and exciting Luffy. Really? Luffy shouted excitedly, stars practically popping out of his head. Hancock, on the other hand, just looked at Naruto with a smile and a barely visible blush. Wow, kid, you haven't been here long and you already have a sweetheart, hahaha, Shikaku said, teasing the blonde. Shut up, raccoon. Naruto yelled, making the tailed beasts laugh. Will you tell them your story? Isabu asked. Naruto sighed at this. I don't know, they don't seem like bad people, and that girl Hancock, her story, even though it's very different, is somewhat similar to mine, Naruto said, looking down. Anyway, I swear I'll kick those celestial dragons' asses even if I become a criminal, Naruto said with determination. I like your idea of extermination, you have my support, kid, Shikaku said. No matter which path you choose, you have our support, Chome seconded his brother. Thank you, guys, Naruto said with a smile. Naruto was suddenly pulled from his thoughts as someone spoke to him. Hey, Naruto, snap out of it, Luffy said, standing in front of the blonde. Naruto blinked a few times, looking around at how everyone was staring at him. What's up? Naruto asked. She wanted to ask you a question, Luffy said, pointing at Hancock. What kind of question? The blonde asked, raising an eyebrow. The girl stared at him for a few seconds before speaking. I've been wondering about this ever since I saw you. Your clothes are torn and your left eye is covered. What happened to you? Hancock asked, drawing everyone's attention to Naruto. Feeling all eyes on him, the blonde boy felt nervous for some reason until he decided to let out another sigh, and it was starting to irritate him to do that. I mentioned earlier that I lived through a war, right? Naruto said, and Hancock nodded. Naruto remained silent for a few seconds, unsure whether to tell them or not, whether they would think he was crazy or believe him. Look, I came here after the war ended. I had a fight with my best friend, who was going underground. I tried to reason with him, but when I saw that he wouldn't change his ideals and ambitions, I had no choice but to kill him, Naruto said, surprising everyone, especially Luffy. For years I trained to become stronger and bring the person I considered my brother back to our village, but he always drifted away, gaining more and more power. I tried everything I could, and I didn't achieve my goal, Naruto said. What exactly does all that have to do with anything? Nyan asked. Naruto looked at her, then lowered his gaze and continued speaking. The war in my world broke out because of me and another person who had the same curse as me, if you can even call it that, Naruto said, leaving everyone even more surprised. Curse? What curse? Luffy asked. This is going to be a long one, damn it, Naruto said, scratching the back of his head. When I was born on October 10th, my village was attacked by a legendary and feared beast known as the Kyubi no Yuko. My father, who at that time was called the fourth Hokage, and unable to stop the Kyubi, made the decision to seal the tailed beast inside his newborn son, thus making him a Jinchuriki, Naruto said, leaving everyone wide-eyed. You see, in my world there are 9 tailed beasts, and each one is sealed inside a person. This is to keep them contained and also to harness their power. We Jinchuriki live in condemnation, we're basically hated and feared by everyone. We're used as weapons and sacrifices. I spent my entire childhood in solitude because my parents died that day. Adults always kept their children away from me, and I never had any friends. But anyway, I'm getting off track, Naruto said, taking a breath and continuing. There was a criminal organization known as Akatsuki who hunted down Jinchuriki and extracted their tailed beasts, killing them instantly. After a while, they had 7 of the 9 existing beasts, leaving only the Jinchuriki of the 8 tails and the Jinchuriki of the 9 tails, that is, me, Naruto said. The leader of that organization, seeing that they wouldn't give him the missing Jinchuriki, decided to declare the 4th Shinobi World War. In this war, everything seemed normal, but everything took a different turn. In the war, it was discovered that the masked man who attacked my village on the day of my birth was collecting the tailed beasts to resurrect the Jubi, who is the original tailed beast that he achieved his goal and became its Jinchuriki. However, I managed to stop him with the help of my friends and comrades, only for someone else to seize power, almost killing me in the process, as he snatched the Kyubi from me. Luckily, my father had half of it, and with the help of one of his former students, he gave me that half along with some of the other bijou, giving me the opportunity to meet someone who revealed many things to me and gave me the power to stop the Jinchuriki of the Jubi, said Naruto. Everyone listened to the Uzumaki story, amazed. You see, this guy named Uchiha Madara wanted to unleash a powerful technique on the moon. This jutsu is known as Mugen Tsukuyomi, and what it does is trap everyone on the planet inside an eternal illusion. My friend Sasuke and I had the mission of stopping the mother of the god of my world and undoing Mugen Tsukuyomi. Once we managed to seal the rabbit goddess, Sasuke and I simply had to undo the genjutsu, but that's when our fight started. He refused and wanted to kill the leaders of the 5 villages to seize power and plunge the world into a dictatorship. I tried to reason with him peacefully, but seeing that he would never change his mind, I had no choice but to kill him. By killing him, I could no longer undo Mugen Tsukuyomi. However, the one who is a god in my world, known as Rakuto Sennin, told me that I could undo it, but at a great cost, said Naruto. What kind of cost? Asked Marigold. Well, he told me that my body and soul would cease to exist or something like that. Before undoing the jutsu, he asked me to do something with my friend. At first, I didn't want to, but I had to do it to free the tailed beasts that Sasuke had trapped. I took his power and freed the tailed beasts and undid the Mugen Tsukuyomi. I just lay down on the ground waiting for me to die or for what the old man said to happen to me. However, I felt a huge sting in my left eye and began to lose my vision little by little until I was completely lost. When I woke up, I was already on this island, Naruto said, leaving everyone speechless. So, you're from another world? Hancock asked, and Naruto nodded. Did that sting you mentioned in your left eye cause you any damage? Is that why you're hiding it? Nyan asked. Naruto shook his head. It's complicated. Remember I said I took my friend's power? Naruto said, and everyone nodded. The power I was referring to was his eyes. I took them from him and put them in my own, Naruto said, shocking everyone. You ripped out your friend's eyes? Luffy asked, equally shocked. Naruto lifted his Hitai-8, revealing his left eye, which was closed. Please keep this a secret, or I'll be forced to kill you if you reveal this, Naruto said, and everyone nodded. Suddenly, they saw Naruto's right eye change from blue to red with 3 tomo, making Luffy's eyes sparkle with excitement. My friend's name was Uchiha Sasuke. In my world, the Uchiha possessed a Kekkei Genkai, which are called dojitsu. This one you see here is the Sharingan, Naruto said. Once again, they saw how his right eye changed. Now, his eye was black at the bottom, and his pupil was a kind of star with a shuriken in the middle. Once again, Luffy's eyes shone with even greater intensity. This is the evolution of the Sharingan, known as the Mangekyo Sharingan. However, what you see here is its eternal form. With the regular Mangekyo, if the user abuses its power, they would lose their sight, becoming blind and therefore unable to use their dojitsu again. This is its eternal version, where its light will never go out, so I can use Sasuke's ocular powers without any repercussions, Naruto said, leaving everyone astonished. What you're about to see is somewhat delicate, so I ask you to please never mention this, okay? Said Naruto, and everyone nodded. Naruto slowly began to open his left eye, causing everyone to focus their attention on him. However, no one but Luffy paid close attention, and with great excitement. Finding a crewmate from another world with strange powers was the best thing that had ever happened to him. When the blonde finally opened his left eye completely, his Shiko no Rinnegan was revealed. Everyone was surprised because his eye was a lilac color with several ripples, and the first 2 ripples contained 6 tomo. What is that eye? Hancock asked. This is known as the Eye of the Gods, the Rinnegan, Naruto said, once again shocking everyone. Although this one is different because of the tomo it possesses, unfortunately, I can't say much about this eye since I don't know much about it, Naruto said with a sigh, hiding his left eye again. No one knew what to say after Naruto's revelations. He was a ninja from another world who had a dangerous beast sealed inside him and possessed the power of a god, or so he claimed. Luffy, for his part, had a huge grin and his eyes were star-shaped. Now that you know all this, I suppose you must be afraid of me. It's understandable, after all, Naruto said, looking down. Nonsense. I won't play you just because of that, Hancock said, blushing slightly. She's right. You can't judge a person without really knowing them. You seem like a very good person, hee, Luffy said with a smile. Upon hearing this, Naruto looked up in surprise, and then, for the first time since arriving there, he smiled. He flashed his foxy grin, which made Hancock blush even more. By the way, kid, what's your name? Nyan asked. Oh, right, I haven't said it. My name is Uzumaki Naruto, the blonde boy replied. So, Naruto, huh? Hancock said, then looked at Luffy. Just because you're Naruto's ally, I'll lend you my ship. We'll leave in the morning. The Kuja pirates will take you to the Tsunade archipelago, Hancock told Luffy. On the pirate ship? The sisters asked. No problem, Luffy replied. I advise you to rest tonight, the journey will be tough, Hancock said, turning and walking toward her bed. I won't be able to sleep, I'm so excited, Luffy said, smiling. I don't think I'll be able to sleep either. I have so many things on my mind that it'll be impossible, Naruto said. Luffy looked at Naruto. When we get to Tsunade, I'll introduce you to the others. You'll like them, Shishishi, Luffy said, laughing and patting Naruto on the back. Hancock, for her part, just watched the interaction between the two, though her gaze was more focused on Naruto, who had a bead of sweat trickling down his cheek because of Luffy's attitude. Suddenly, Luffy's stomach growled, and he sat down on the floor, clutching it. Now that I think about it, I haven't felt hungry, Naruto said within his mindscape. That's because of us. Since you have us and your own energy, you're able to survive a month without eating and can last in battles for days or even weeks, Saiken said. Anyway, even if you're not hungry or tired, you should eat and sleep. You never know what might happen, Matatabi said, and Naruto nodded, leaving his mindscape. Naruto turned around and started walking. Where are you going, Naruto? Hancock asked. I'm going to get something to eat, Naruto said without stopping. Luffy, hearing this, stood up, ready to follow the blonde, but they were both stopped. Wait, Hancock said, making them both stop. Sonia, Mary, tell them to prepare dinner for Naruto and Luffy, Hancock said, surprising both sisters. For the men, Sonia said. Sister, that's. Marigold tried to say, but Hancock interrupted her. Do you understand? Hancock said, making them simply nod. Just dinner? Luffy asked. Old Nyan turned to look at both boys, but more specifically at Luffy. Actually, it's going to be a banquet planned for the return of the Kuja pirates, Nyan explained. That sounds better, I'm so happy. Alright, let's eat. Luffy exclaimed happily. Naruto turned to look at the women. Aren't you coming? Naruto asked Hancock, who shook her head. No, I'm tired, I'll rest a bit, Hancock said, turning her back to them. I see. If you want me to bring you food, you can ask and I'll come and get it for you, Naruto said. The place remained silent for a couple of minutes that seemed like an eternity, and Luffy was starting to get impatient. I don't think so either, Nyan said to Hancock, who remained silent with a blush on her cheeks and her eyes sparkling. Alright, let's go, Luffy, said Naruto, starting to walk, followed by Luffy and the sisters. I can't believe Hebeheim has feelings for him. Nyan thought, watching Naruto walk away and remembering when Hancock told the blonde boy she liked him. Later, Naruto and Luffy were inside a house usually used for banquets and other events. While Naruto ate in a normal way, though for its inhabitants that would be devouring food, the word normal was apt for what Luffy was doing, as he was practically gobbling up all the food, bite after bite. Because he's a rubber man, he can fit a lot of food in his mouth, so eating like that doesn't seem to affect him. Everyone watched Luffy and Naruto eat. Some weren't entirely happy that the two were there, but they should respect it since it was the Empress's decision. Even so, the Kuja pirates couldn't help but want to attack them, and Naruto noticed this, remaining alert at all times, sensing the negativity in the air. He was surprised by how carefree Luffy was, since even surrounded by people who probably wanted to kill him, he remained focused solely on devouring everything in front of him. Naruto could hear the women talking. Not all of them were happy to have them at his banquet. They wondered what he and his friend had done to convince Hancock to let them stay on the island and, on top of that, eat his food. He didn't really care if they spoke ill of him or tried to attack him. He could easily make them retreat, outnumber the pirates with his shadow clone jutsu, or simply use his shinobi techniques to escape and avoid an unnecessary fight. Naruto saw 4 of them stand up, knives in hand, ready to attack. He was about to intervene when Luffy suddenly stood up. Are you crazy? Luffy shouted, disconcerting most of them and making the 4 women nervous. Luffy grabbed a frying pan and a ladle. I've had enough, he yelled again. The girls started running toward him again, their weapons gripped tightly, ready to attack. So you're going to do it to me? What are you doing? Luffy asked, causing the girls to stop or try to stop, resulting in them slipping and falling on top of each other. This caused Naruto, who had witnessed the whole thing, to sweat drop, perhaps because they had misunderstood him. Listen, girls, this isn't a celebration. Where's the music? Luffy said, starting to bang a pan with a ladle while humming, or rather shouting, and dancing. This action provoked laughter from most of the girls present, dispelling the tense and negative atmosphere of moments before, replacing it with something more cheerful and entertaining. Without a doubt, Luffy knew how to liven up any tense situation. Later that night, the banquet had ended, and now everyone watched as Luffy used chopsticks to make funny faces, provoking laughter from all of them. Some girls joined him, doing the same with chopsticks, making strange faces while dancing with a basket in their hands. Then, using ink, he drew a face on his stomach, which then inflated and made it speak. However, things started to get weird as the girls pulled at Luffy, stretching his skin. Then the girls put up a sign with 20 berries to pay to touch Luffy, who tensed up at the sight of a bunch of girls. He was saved by Margaret. However, Naruto was still inside, calmly eating and drinking until the girls pointed at him, screaming and running towards him, thinking he could stretch too. When they were just centimeters away from touching him, he disappeared, and in his place was another girl, leaving her and the others confused. They couldn't stop themselves and bumped into each other. Wow, that's a very useful ability, Naruto said from afar. What a strange way to learn to use a Menota-Jikara, Kurama said with a sweat drop. Why did you use the Shiko no Rinnegan ability and not the Kawarimi no Jutsu? Yuki asked. I wanted to try it out. Sasuke used it a few times, and I was curious what it felt like, hee, Naruto said, laughing nervously. You're quite a character, Naruto, Kurama sighed. However, a shout interrupted their conversation. Look, there she is, one of the girls yelled, pointing at Naruto, who tensed up. Damn it, strategic retreat, Naruto said, using the Shunshin no Jutsu, body flicker technique, disappearing in a whirlwind. While all this was happening, Hancock was on the balcony of her castle, gazing into the distance while Sander Sonia and Marigold watched her with concern. "What's wrong with our sister?" Marigold asked. "She hasn't eaten or drunk anything, she's just exhausted." "She hasn't even slept," Sander Sonia said. "Could it be because they forced her to go?" "What's wrong?" Marigold asked. Hancock walked over to a glass of water, took a sip, and gazed at her reflection as she thought. Tomorrow morning, Hancock thought, watching a drop fall into her glass of water, noticing she was crying. Suddenly, she collapsed to the floor, causing concern among the two sisters, who rushed to her aid. They saw her cheeks were flushed and she was breathing heavily. Meanwhile, with Luffy and Margaret were in a small house in the mountains. "Nyan-sama," Margaret said. "What's wrong, Margaret?" the old woman Nyan asked. "Well, Luffy has become too popular with the women of the village," Margaret said. "Meeting a man is a rare experience for them," Nyan said, turning her attention back to her newspaper. "Oh, old bean," Luffy said, entering the house with a huge piece of meat on his shoulders. "You should probably hide for the time being," Nyan said, then realized what Luffy had called her. "And who are you calling a bean?" Nyan said. "Now that I think about it, where's Naruto?" Luffy asked. "Here I am," Naruto said, appearing out of nowhere in a whirlwind, leaving Luffy amazed. He approached the Uzumaki. "Another ninja technique? What's it called, and what does it do?" Luffy asked, making Naruto sweat drop. "Shunshin no Jutsu. It's an instantaneous movement technique that allows me to go from one point to another as long as it's not too far away," Naruto said nervously. "Amazing," Luffy said. After this, they both sat on the ground. Luffy started eating his meat while watching old Nyan reading the newspaper, while Naruto was focused on trying to do something. "Looks like you've already had some food, Margaret. Make some tea for the boys," Nyan said. "Yes." Margaret replied, leaving. "Grandma, do you really like newspapers?" Luffy asked. "News doesn't reach the calm belt, but our empress is a Shichibukai after all. It would be difficult for her not to know the state of world affairs," Nyan said. "A Shichibukai? Who?" Luffy asked. "Hebiheim-sama," Nyan said, looking at Luffy. Hearing this caused Luffy to shout in surprise. "She's a Shichibukai? So she's really strong?" Luffy asked, attracting Naruto's attention. "You're a pirate, and you didn't even know that?" Nyan said, not understanding Luffy. "Excuse me for interrupting, but what is a Shichibukai?" Naruto asked. The Shichibukai, also known as the Seven Warlords of the Sea, are 7 powerful pirates allied with the Marines, who are practically their enemy. Their alliance grants them certain freedoms, and their crimes are pardoned in exchange for their assistance when requested, Nyan explained. "I see. I suppose the Marines are part of the world government," Naruto said, and Nyan nodded. In any case, it was 11 years ago that Hebiheim became the empress of this land and captain of the Kuja pirates. She was still young then, but after just one campaign, she earned a bounty of 80 million, Nyan said, looking at the two young men. "Only one?" Luffy asked, surprised. Along with the already famous name Kuja, she attracted the attention of the Marines. They approached her immediately, aware of her potential, and offered her a position as a Shichibukai, Nyan said as Margaret placed 3 cups of tea on the table. "But now he's in danger of losing that title, because," Nyan said, proceeding to recount what the newspaper said. After a few minutes, Luffy shouted, "Huh? Are you saying that the Shichibukai and the Marine headquarters are going to fight Whitebeard's pirates? That's crazy. What's going to happen now? You really surprise me. There are limits to ignorance, you know. Nothing is certain for now, of course, but statistically speaking, yes, a battle is imminent." Nyan said, looking at the newspaper again. "Great, war will break out in this world too," Naruto thought, a bead of sweat forming on his brow and a weary expression as he sipped his tea. It was the world government that brought this situation about. Whitebeard is a man who won't allow the death of a crewmate. The world government has announced the public execution of one of Whitebeard's elite subordinates, Portgas D. Ace, commander of the 2nd Division, Nyan said, causing Luffy's eyes to widen and his sweat to break out. Margaret noticed Luffy's reaction, as did Naruto. "What's going on?" Margaret asked. "Who?" Luffy asked nervously. "Ace. Fire Fist Ace," Nyan repeated. This shocked Luffy, who remained silent for a few seconds. "Ace, he's going to be executed?" Luffy said in shock. "Yes, it seems a pirate named Blackbeard captured Fire Fist Ace for the government, and with that, he earned a position as a Shichibukai," Nyan said. Upon hearing this, Luffy placed his tea on the table, trembling slightly. "Blackbeard?" Luffy murmured. "Having captured such a valuable prize, it seems the government has decided to use this pirate Ace," Nyan continued. "Old woman," Luffy said, seeing that Nyan was still talking. "Old woman!" Luffy shouted, drawing everyone's attention. He stood up and grabbed the elderly woman by the shoulders, trembling and sweating. "That's my brother. Ace is my older brother," Luffy exclaimed, shocking the old woman, whose eyes widened in surprise. "What?" Nyan exclaimed in astonishment. "Luffy's brother, huh? This is serious," Naruto thought, lowering his gaze. "Is he really your older brother?" Nyan asked, standing up. "I didn't even know he'd been captured, and now he's going to be executed." "There's no way to escape something like that," Luffy said hysterically. "If Whitebeard prevails in this battle, it's possible he can be saved," Nyan said, sitting back down and looking at the newspaper in her hands. "What can I do? Where will you execute him?" Luffy asked. It's said that the place will be Mariajoa Square, home to the Marine headquarters, in a week, so from today, that would be 6 days, Nyan said, looking at Luffy. "But that's too soon," Luffy said. "How long does it take to get to the Sabaody archipelago from here?" he asked. "Well, it definitely takes more than a week," Nyan said. "But then even before I can reunite with my crew, it will all be over for Ace." "How long would it take to get from here to where Ace is?" Luffy asked. "To Impel Down, where he's currently imprisoned, it will take a week on a pirate ship, or 4 days if it's a marine transport," Nyan said. "Why? Are marine ships really that fast?" Luffy asked. "There are certain currents used exclusively by the Marines. Enies Lobby, Impel Down, and Marine Headquarters, a large spiral current has been created to connect these organizations. When the gates of justice are opened, gigantic gates are located in these 3 places. The currents can be channeled, opening access points in these locations. In other words, if the gates aren't open, a ship caught in this current would simply drift. The pirate ship would be forced to avoid the whirlpools and would have to take the longest route," Nyan explained to Luffy. "So without a marine ship, it would be practically impossible for a pirate to access those places," Naruto thought with a sigh. It was the longest and most complex explanation he'd heard in this new world. "What should I do?" Luffy said, looking down, then reaching for his hat and pulling out a small piece of paper that was burning. "No way, is that your brother's Vivre card?" Nyan asked, surprised. "Was that the piece of paper that was so important?" Margaret asked. "No, this is a different piece. It's Ace's," Luffy said. "Also known as the Paper of Life, a Vivre card that indicates the owner's direction and life force," Nyan explained. "So that's why it's so small?" Margaret asked. Luffy turned to look at Margaret, who was standing next to Naruto. "It was 10 times bigger when I got it," Luffy said, surprising both blondes. "Ace has his own adventure," Luffy said, remembering when Ace gave him the Vivre card before they parted ways in Alabasta. Flashback. "I want you to keep this, here," Ace said, tossing the paper to Luffy. Luffy looked at the paper, not knowing what it was. "This will reunite us," Ace said with a smile. "What?" a piece of paper? Luffy asked, not understanding what was so special about a piece of paper. Yes, it's special. With it, we'll reunite. Don't lose it, Ace said. I'll take care of it, Luffy said with a smile. It's only natural that the older brother worries about the little idiot, Ace said with a smile, clutching his hat. End flashback. Luffy watched as the large piece of paper shrank to a tiny size, slowly charring and evaporating. My brother's a tough guy. If I say I want to save him, he'll just get mad at me, Luffy said, clenching his fist. But, sorry guys, wait for me a little longer. Luffy said, thinking of his crewmates. Saving my brother Ace is more important. Luffy shouted. I hope you realize this is reckless. Do you want to be part of a large-scale war? You'll be like an ant in a huge storm, simply tossed around helplessly until you meet your end, Nyan said. Naruto stood up, placing his tea on the table and approaching Luffy, putting his hand on his shoulder. This caused both Luffy and the two women to look at him. Luffy has my support in this. I really don't want to get involved in another war, but I can't let my captain die. What kind of crewmate would I be if I let that happen? Naruto said. Thanks, Naruto, Luffy replied. You have nothing to thank me for, said Naruto. Very well, so you plan to rescue a prisoner while the eyes of the world are upon him, and to have even the slightest chance of succeeding, you must go without delay to the great prison where the prisoner is being held. If you wait until he's transferred to the Marineford, then the admirals and the Shichibukai will naturally be present, because your brother is the most important prisoner in the world, even within the prison itself. He will undoubtedly be guarded by a very powerful force, so even entering the place might be impossible, said Nyan. Infiltration isn't a problem, at least not for me. Remember, I'm a ninja, said Naruto. That's true. With Naruto-san's help, it shouldn't be too difficult, said Margaret. Even if Naruto is a ninja, it will be impossible to infiltrate a prison that's underwater. There are so many levels in that place and so many obstacles that even for you, it could become tedious and complicated, said Nyan. Either way, whether or not we manage to infiltrate Impel Down, there's still the transportation issue. You mentioned the Shichibukai would be there, so Hancock should be there too, right? We should take advantage of this and ask Hancock to take us to Impel Down, Naruto said, looking at the old woman Nyan. Unfortunately, Hebiheim has refused to attend such an important event. This is what's jeopardizing her position as a Shichibukai. Hebiheim is currently on thin ice, Nyan said. Anyway, how would Hebiheim get both of you on a marine warship? Nyan asked. They both realized it was true, they couldn't both go. Wait, a warship? Do you have a marine ship we can use? Then I'll go ask for it right now, Luffy said. Wait, Luffy, I doubt she'll listen to you. Let me talk to her, said Naruto, and Luffy nodded, leaving the area followed by Naruto and Nyan. Upon arriving at the castle, they stopped at the entrance when they saw someone running by in a state of agitation. Nyan Basama, said a girl named Inishida. What's wrong, Inishida? You look agitated, said Nyan. Thank goodness, I was just about to call her, said Inishida. What happened? Asked Naruto. Well, Hebiheim-sama seems to have fallen ill with a heart condition, said Inishida, shocking the three of them. Right now, said Luffy. It can't be, exclaimed Nyan. Hancock was in her bed, her face red, sweating, and breathing heavily, clutching her forehead. A doctor, Marigold, and Sander Sonia were beside her, along with Hancock's snake. Annie-sama, the two sisters exclaimed in concern. Am I going to die? Hancock said. Annie-sama, hold on. Sander Sonia exclaimed worriedly. Annie-sama. Marigold exclaimed in the same tone as her sister. I heard Hebiheim has fallen ill, said Nyan, who had just entered, followed by Luffy and Naruto. Nyanba, Sander Sonia said. As she got close enough to see her properly, Nyan was surprised. Naruto, you wait outside for a moment, Nyan said, looking at Naruto. Huh? Naruto said, but noticing the situation, he simply nodded. Hey Luffy, you forgot your meat, Naruto said, distracting Luffy, who, remembering, ran off. He simply winked at Nyan and left. She says she feels something pressing on her chest, but I don't know what it is. I've never seen these symptoms before. I don't know what I can give her, said the woman who appeared to be a doctor. Hebiheim-sama seems to be suffering, and she hasn't eaten anything yet, Inishida said. Nyan was simply in shock, looking at Hancock's condition, and she began to remember all the interactions and reactions Hancock had when she spoke with the Uzumaki just a few hours earlier, so she had an idea. Tomorrow morning, Nyan said, causing Hancock to squirm. Impossible. Nyan thought in surprise. Yuzu. Nyan said, causing Hancock to groan in pain. Nah. Nyan said again, eliciting the same reaction from Hancock. Hebiheim-sama, the doctor exclaimed with concern. Nyanba, stop playing with her. Sandersonia said somewhat angrily. Can't you see she's suffering? Marigold said in the same tone as Sandersonia. Nyan simply turned to look at them seriously. This is no game. Nyan exclaimed seriously. She simply slapped her forehead. I see, how come I didn't think of that? Nyan whispered with a sigh. What an inconvenient virus. Nyan said. Huh, virus? Marigold said. Do you know what this is about? Sandersonia asked. Nyanba, it hurts, Hancock said in pain. Am I going to die? The dark-haired woman asked. Nyan narrowed her eyes. Yes, you will die, Nyan said seriously. What is she saying? Marigold shouted. Stop with the silly jokes, Nyanba. Sonia said. The previous empress died of the same thing, Nyan said, causing everyone to tense up at that statement. The empress herself told me before she died. I also fell ill, but I left this country and managed to survive, Nyan said, shocking everyone. Hebiheim, listen, Uzumaki Naruto is here, Nyan said. Wait, Nyanba, Marigold said. He has something to tell you. Can you hear it? Nyan asked while Hancock watched her. Anisama is sick. Sonia exclaimed angrily. What is she planning? Marigold asked in the same tone as the green-haired woman. However, the dark-haired woman suddenly stood up. He got up. Inishida exclaimed. All right, I'll listen to him, Hancock said. Meanwhile, old Nyan was surprised, she couldn't believe what she was thinking was actually happening. Hancock's reaction certainly confirmed it. You're a very lucky man, Uzumaki Naruto. Was he able to move a mountain like this? Nyan thought, watching Hancock talking to Inishida. Meanwhile, Naruto, so you're telling me I have to train my ninjutsu until I can do it without hand seals? Naruto asked Kurama, who nodded. Exactly, it'll be very useful. No matter how fast you are at hand seals, someone will always manage to break through, so it'll be difficult for you to do them, Kurama said. I see, sounds good, Naruto said. By the way, I've been wanting to ask this for a while, can I use Kamui? Naruto asked, crossing his arms. You mean Obito's jutsu? Kurama asked, and the blonde nodded. I don't think so. His ability was unique. However, possessing the Amenota Jikara in your Rinnegan I not only serves as a transfer ability but also as a space-time ability similar to Kagaya's, Kurama explained. Try using the Banbutsu Sozo no Jutsu to create your own Kamui, Sun said. I thought it was only for creating physical things, Naruto said, tilting his head. Initially, yes, but you can also create ninjutsu with that technique by combining yin-yang, Kokuo said. Try this, Naruto. Activate your Mangekyo Sharingan. Once activated, gather the yin-yang energy into your right eye and try to release it, creating the vortex that Obito created when he used his jutsu. Try it with an object, and if it works, practice with a clone, taking yourself to the Kamui dimension, Kurama explained. Naruto nodded and left his mental space, activating his Mangekyo Sharingan. After that, he took out a kunai and placed it on the ground before walking away. Once he had gained some distance, he focused his gaze on the kunai, beginning to channel both energies to his right eye and release them. A vortex, similar to the one Kakashi had first seen, began to form, distorting the area where the kunai was. It was slowly being absorbed, but Naruto fell to the ground, panting and sweating, his right eye bleeding. "It's harder than I thought," Naruto said, panting slightly. He took a breath, then approached the kunai, picked it up, and put it away. "I've got the basics for Kamui. This is going to be tricky," Naruto said with a sigh. Suddenly, he heard something behind him, so he deactivated his dojutsu and wiped the blood off his face as best he could. "Do you need something, Naruto?" Hancock asked. "Oh, what are you doing outside?" "I thought you were sick," Naruto said. "Old Nyan told me you wanted to tell me something, and besides, there's no illness that can touch me," Hancock said, causing a bead of sweat to appear on Naruto's face, followed by a sigh of frustration at the woman's stubbornness. "I see. Well, she's right. You see, Luffy recently learned that his brother, Portgas D. Ace, is going to be executed. He wants to go rescue him, but old Nyan said that a pirate ship wouldn't be useful for getting there in time," Naruto said, causing Hancock to gasp slightly. "Luffy's brother, is he a pirate from Whitebeard's crew?" Hancock asked, having never expected such a thing. "Under these circumstances, I should say it's none of my business. However, I agreed to join Luffy's crew, so I must help him. Could you take us to the prison where Ace is currently being held, please?" Naruto said, giving a slight bow that surprised everyone. "Have you lost your mind, Uzumaki Naruto? You know the truth, and yet you're asking her to take you and the Straw Hat to a place she detests." Sonia shouted angrily, drawing Naruto's attention, who looked away. "You're the worst kind of man." Marigold yelled, echoing Sonia's sentiments. "We showed you mercy, and this is how you repay us?" Sonia demanded. "Mercy, you say? I remember telling you about my ocular powers and that I come from another dimension. If I were truly an evil person, I would have wiped this island off the map the moment you tried to attack me," Naruto said, making both girls tense up. "You want me to obey the order to meet with the other Shichibukai?" Hancock asked, drawing everyone's attention. "Anisama!" Sonia cried. "Kill him!" Marigold shouted, forgetting what Naruto had just said. "If that is your wish," Hancock said in a subdued voice, "I will go wherever you want," she said happily, her voice gentle as a faint blush rose to her cheeks, shocking Sonia, Mari, and Nyan. "Are you serious?" "I'm not forcing you to do anything, it's just a favor I'm asking," Naruto said. "It doesn't matter, I'll accept just because you asked me to," Hancock said. Hebiheim decided to go to headquarters. "What's going on here, Nyanba?" Mari and Sonia exclaimed in unison. "Hebiheim's suffering is the disease of love." Nyan shouted, leaving both sisters even more shocked. "The previous empress died of love," Nyan said as her hair whipped in the wind. "There's a saying in the East Blue," she said as she twirled around. "Love is a hurricane." Nyan shouted into the air, both hands raised, and an explosion of pink fire surrounded her. "What on earth are they talking about? Did this woman only accept because she's in love with me?" Naruto said, somewhat tense and nervous, since he had heard everything the old woman had shouted, while Hancock seemed not to, as she was just staring at him with a smile, her eyes sparkling, and a blush on her cheeks. "You're quite the charmer, pup, ha ha ha," Kurama said mockingly, bursting into laughter along with the other bijou, except for Matatabi and Kokuo. Later, after Naruto left to warn Luffy, Hancock said, "What's wrong with me? I can't refuse anything Naruto asks of me." She brought both hands to her cheeks, tossing her hair. "I just answered without thinking, and I don't regret it," Hancock said, as Nyan watched her. "That's love. Nyan said, nervous and surprised. Love? Hancock asked. It's the pain of thinking about someone you can't see, and that can cause your death. The previous empress fell in love with a man, but she was empress, so she had no choice but to suppress her feelings and had to stay on this island where she met her end. That pain has taken many lives, Nyan said while Hancock listened attentively. But the decision you made to accompany him has saved your life. If you go to headquarters and retain your title of Shichibukai, you will save our country and help Naruto at the same time, Nyan said. What kind of fate awaits him? No man would think of going to Impel Down, much less want to enter. Uzumaki Naruto and Monkey D. Luffy are certainly strange, Nyan said. After a while, Hancock contacted Vice Admiral Momonga of the Marines, telling him that she agreed to meet with the other Shichibukai, but on one condition, that they first go to Impel Down. 3 hours later, Naruto and Luffy were aboard Hancock's ship. Luffy was sitting on one of the snake heads, waving goodbye to the girls, while Naruto was on board practicing his kamui. In the last 3 hours, he'd used his spirit bomb technique to create a gourd like Gaara's, however, this one was small but capable of storing a lot of sand. Using his clones, he practiced Shikaku's magnet release, managing to gain some control over the Kekkei Genkai by manipulating sand. His level was very low compared to Gaara, who was an expert, but he still had the practice to create some things with sand. Meanwhile, with 3 clones, he began practicing kamui. He needed this jutsu if he wanted to help Luffy with his mission. He could infiltrate Hancock without problems using his transformation technique, but Luffy was an obstacle to the plan. He managed to create kamui with the power of the old sage of 6 paths and tested it with his clones. The only problem was that it drained a lot of chakra because it was an imperfect jutsu, but it still worked for how he wanted to use it, which was to, so to speak, keep Luffy inside his kamui dimension. He could only use it twice, once to put Luffy in and once to take him out. His kamui wasn't at the same level as Obito's, but with time and practice, he would perfect it and even use it in other ways. Suddenly, he heard footsteps behind him and saw that it was Luffy and Hancock, who looked away, not wanting to meet his eyes directly. Once they had said their goodbyes and made their preparations, they set sail for where Momonga was waiting for them. By the way, Naruto, Hancock said without looking at him, how do you plan to infiltrate the ship? The dark-haired woman asked. Well, these last few hours I've been creating a jutsu called kamui. With it, I'll be able to infiltrate Luffy since he was the problem. For my part, there wouldn't be any, since I have my own methods, Naruto said, making Luffy's eyes light up at the mention of new jutsu. Awesome. I really like you more and more, Naruto. How does your new jutsu work? Luffy asked excitedly. Well, kamui allows me to access a dimension separate from this one, a dimension only I can access thanks to my right eye. I can also store things and people there, Naruto explained. So you'll put Luffy in that dimension? Hancock asked. Yes, I've been practicing with a lot of things. Luffy will be inside until we arrive. Luffy shouldn't have any problem with food since I made sure to put plenty in there, as well as water. He should be fine until we get there, Naruto said. In that case, do it quickly, we're almost there, Hancock said, and Naruto nodded. Alright, Luffy, I'll take you out once we arrive, okay? Naruto said, and the straw hat simply nodded with a smile. Naruto activated his Mangekyo Sharingan, beginning to absorb Luffy into a vortex. Everyone watched as Luffy was absorbed by Naruto's right eye until nothing remained of him. The blonde boy fell to the ground, panting slightly as his eye bled a little, causing Hancock to worry. Naruto, are you alright? Hancock asked, helping Naruto to his feet. Why yes, don't worry, it's a side effect since it's an incomplete technique. It'll pass in a little while, Naruto said. Well, what should I call you? Empress? Hebiheim? Naruto asked curiously. Why you can call me Hancock, the raven-haired woman said, cupping her cheeks in her hands as she blushed. Hancock, hold out your hand, Naruto said, and she did as he instructed. Naruto made a hand seal and then burst into smoke. When the smoke dissipated, Naruto was gone, and in Hancock's hand was a kind of necklace. Hancock delicately took the necklace, which appeared to be made of pearls, and placed it around her neck as her blush deepened, as if Naruto were lovingly embracing her. The Kuja ship then arrived at a marine vessel where a dead sea king lay, and atop it, someone was eating its flesh. "I was expecting you, BOA Hancock," said the vice admiral. "I already told you my condition via Den Mushi," Hancock replied. "And it's already been approved by the higher command. We'll be making a stop at Impel Down," said Momonga, eating the meat on his sword. "Will you and your snake be the only ones on board?" Momonga asked, leaping onto his ship and sheathing his sword. "Even though you're a Shichibukai, pirates aren't welcome there, but we'll make an exception for you because we can't waste any time," said the vice admiral. "I know that," Hancock said simply. "Then take good care of yourself, Annie-sama," said Sonia. "Come back alive, Annie-sama," said Marigold. "We wish you the best in battle, Hebiheim-sama." "I have to leave, but I'm leaving the country in your hands," Hancock said. "Yes," they all replied. Hancock, who was standing on the serpent of her ship, began to descend until she was on the ship. "It was trouble waiting for you, but you kept your word," Momonga said, watching Hancock step onto the ship and begin walking toward him. "Besides, you refused the order to assemble. What made you change your mind?" Momonga asked. "Nothing in particular," Hancock said simply. "Well, anyway, can you return my crew to normal? We can't return to headquarters with them in that state." "Are they dead?" Momonga asked, looking at the Marines who were turned to stone with heart-shaped eyes and hearts sprouting from their chests. "Wow, that ability, Mero is amazing, even if she abuses it," thought Naruto, who was transformed into the necklace Hancock was wearing. "I'm entrusting my crew to you. We can't take the ship to Impel Down with them in that state. It'll be a problem if they see them like this," Momonga said. Hancock began walking toward the petrified Marines, then extended her hand and blew a kiss, releasing a few hearts from her Mero no Mi, Cock-sama, they all said before collapsing to the ground. "Get up, you idiots!" Momonga shouted. "Yes, sir," they replied, then rushed to their stations so the ship could set sail. Meanwhile, Marine headquarters. Admiral-in-Chief Sengoku, a Marine called out. "We have news from Vice Admiral Momonga," he said again. "Huh?" said a man with a long braided beard and mustache, wearing his Marine uniform with several medals and a hat with a seagull on it. "The pirate Empress BOA Hancock has finally agreed. They're heading this way now," the Marine said. "Finally. I hope she keeps her word. That woman is too strong, and 6 of the 7 Shichibukai will be here," Sengoku said. "And what about the other one we have in prison? Has he reconsidered?" Sengoku asked. "No, he remains firm in his refusal to participate in the battle. He said he doesn't care if his Shichibukai title is revoked," the Marine said. "I thought he'd be the most helpful and fight alongside us, but he just caused a scene at the last minute." "Jinbe," Sengoku said seriously. Suddenly, another Marine with spiked shoulder pads rushed into the room. "I have news, Admiral-in-Chief. Admiral Kizaru captured 500 pirates during the Sabaody Archipelago incident, but he mentioned he can't take them to Impel Down," the Marine said. "Take care of it. I don't want to know anything that isn't related to Whitebeard," Sengoku said. "Besides, Saint Roswald, the celestial dragon is..." The Marine tried to say, but was interrupted by Sengoku, who was starting to get stressed. "Let the admirals handle it." "Where's Garp?" Sengoku asked. "Vice Admiral Garp departed for Impel Down a moment ago," the Marine said. "What's that man thinking, doing whatever he pleases at a time like this?" Sengoku said. He was interrupted again by another Marine who entered the room. "Admiral-in-Chief Sengoku," the Marine said, drawing his attention. "It's an emergency." "Whitebeard has made his move," the Marine exclaimed. "Were you notified by the ships monitoring him?" Sengoku asked. Put them in contact. I want to hear it directly, Sengoku said, pointing to his Den Mushi. Well, the 23 ships monitoring Whitebeard have been sunk by Moby Dick. We lost contact with them a few minutes ago, the Marine said, sweating. What did you say? Sengoku asked. There's also concern about the movement of other pirate ships in the New World. Although we don't have information on the number of ships coming, I've already sent more ships to replace the previous ones, the Marine said. Upon hearing all this, Sengoku, his expression one of astonishment and seriousness, stood up, slamming his hand on the table. Absolutely not. They're already on the move. We don't know their exact location. If A stays there, the battle could end up at Impel Down, Sengoku declared gravely. Understood, the Marines present responded. Meanwhile, Garp was walking through the dark corridors of Impel Down. This way, Vice Admiral Garp, a guard called. Watch out, the guard shouted, striking a military pose as Garp passed by. Yes, was all he replied. This doesn't look good, Garp said, eyeing a chained boy. Are you still breathing? He asked, prompting the boy to look at him. Ace? Meanwhile, Garp walked through the dark corridors of Impel Down. This way, Vice Admiral Garp, said a guard. Watch out, said the guard, striking a military pose as Garp passed by. Yes, was all he replied. This doesn't look good, said Garp, noticing a chained boy. Are you still breathing? He said, prompting the boy to look at him. Ace? Meanwhile, Garp walked through the dark corridors of Impel Down. This way, Vice Admiral Garp, said a guard. Watch out, said the guard, striking a military pose as Garp passed by. Yes, was all he replied. This doesn't look good, said Garp, noticing a chained boy. Are you still breathing? He said, prompting the boy to look at him. Ace?